So I don't think I expected this. I knew I was going to enjoy reading Dune again because, hell, it's Dune. At this point, I think it's one of the greatest science fiction novels ever written, and I don't think that's a particularly controversial opinion. Whether you personally like it or or not is another matter because it's not an easy book. Let's be real, but that's a good thing in my book, excuse the pun. But in terms of influence, world building, scope, it's up there. So many things owe its existence to Dune. And I mean, that could be a whole video in itself. But I didn't expect the Hebrew translation to completely change how I experienced this book. And I don't mean that it translated well. I mean, I think it actually kind of perfected it, which is a very dangerous thing to say on the internet, because we're talking about Frank Herbert here. You're not exactly talking about someone who's writing people quietly dismiss. Dune has been analysed to death for 60 years. Every sentence has probably 3 PhDs written about it. Yet reading it in Hebrew genuinely made me appreciate this novel in a very different way. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm not saying that Frank Herbert became a bad writer because I read a different translation. I'm saying that Herbert somehow... He wrote this book, it's been translated, and somehow the Hebrew makes it feel older. Like, older, ancient, they're the only words I can think of. Less like I'm reading a science fiction novel and I'm sitting there reading something, an ancient manuscript somebody discovered in a cave near the Dead Sea. The whole thing has this very rich texture to it. It feels a bit like reading scripture. Scripture has a way... it makes it feel like it's existed centuries before you found it. And I don't know if that's because Herbert naturally carries that weight, or whether it's just an exceptionally good translation, probably both. One thing that surprised me was just how naturally Herbert's ideas fit into Hebrew. People forget that Dune has a lot of Jewish references. They're not always obvious. Some of them are hidden beneath all the politics, ecology, religion, and philosophy. But Judaism is in the mix. It's one of the ingredients mixed into everything else. Now, obviously, you have Arabic influences, you have Islamic, biblical, Christian, Zen, Buddhism. You've got this huge melting pot of ideas, and reading all of them through Hebrew somehow tied up a lot of those loose threads and pulled everything together. Some passages almost feel like they were waiting to be written that way. I would stop and think, this sounds more natural, which wasn't something I expected. Now, I'm going to criticize Frank Herbert, because nothing is beyond criticism, even if it's one of your favourite science fiction novels. I actually think Herbert's Arabic, was probably one of the weakest parts of Dune. Now, please don't misunderstand me when I say that. There's a lot of respect there. I'm not talking inspiration. Just the word choice, some of the words felt misguided, a little messy, linguistically. And there are words that don't quite land. Ideas that feel like they've travelled a very long way before arriving on your page. It's not bad by any means. It's actually very good. It's just not as clear as everything else. And this is where the Hebrew translation surprised me. It quietly fixed some of that. It didn't rewrite the novel. It didn't change Herbert's intentions. But by making the language itself feel more intentionally consistent. Religious vocabularies suddenly feel like they belong together. Historical echoes become clear. Everything feels tighter. That's probably the word I've been looking for, tighter. Hebrew is an incredibly direct language. It doesn't waste many words. English has a habit of wandering around a sentence before it arrives where it wanted to go. Hebrew tends to hit the point. It says exactly what it says, and then you move on, and that actually suits Dune. Because Herbert is constantly throwing these huge ideas about philosophy and religion and spirituality at you. And sometimes in English, the ideas become a little dense. And I don't mean dense and difficult, I mean just slightly overgrown. In Hebrew, all those little things, or that stuff, it all feels much sharper, cleaner, almost like someone polished an old piece of bronze. It's still ancient, it just catches that light differently. There is a theory, and not everyone agrees with it, and I don't know if I agree with it, but it's an interesting one. It's wonderful when you go on 2 a.m. in the morning internet deep dives, that Dune was very loosely echoes aspects of the Passover story. It's not a direct retelling. There's nothing direct about it. More like certain themes and structures floating underneath the narrative: liberation, oppression, people's transformation through hardship, the emergence of a leader, journey, identity, covenant. Whether this is real or not, whether it was consciously intended at all, who knows? People will argue about that forever. By the time we hit the date that Dune takes place in, we'll still be arguing about it. But reading the book in Hebrew makes those echoes much easier to notice. And the translation didn't invent them. They were always there. The language simply gave them more room to breathe. Reading it, I found myself thinking I didn't think I noticed that before. And Dune is one of those books that if you read it multiple times, you get different things from it each time. And that's one of the strangest experiences you can have with a book you've read multiple times, feeling like you've discovered it again. That's what's happened here. I wasn't reading a different novel, I was reading the same novel, just a slightly different angle, maybe? Almost like somebody had cleaned an old painting and the painting hasn't changed. You're just seeing details that were always there, and honestly, I think it's one of the greatest compliments I can pay any translation. Translation isn't just replacing words, it's recreating the experience. Sometimes improving the experience, and then probably another controversial thing I'm going to say, I genuinely think this translation surpasses the English original. I know that almost sounds ridiculous. How can a translation be better than the original? Normally I agree. Usually something gets lost. A joke, a rhythm, a tiny piece of meaning. But every now and then, a language happens to fit a story so perfectly that something unexpected happens. The story comes alive in a different way. That's what's happened here. The scale somehow feels even bigger, which is ridiculous because Dune already feels enormous. It's one of the biggest fictional universes ever created. Yet somehow, Hebrew makes Arrakis feel older. Makes everything, the religion, the philosophies, the characters, the story, everything feel older. Everything just gained another 1,000 years, and I absolutely love it. I'm going to say I'm not going to stop reading Dune in English. There are things I love about the original text. There's a rhythm that only English can create. But if someone asked me today which version would you rather sit down with, I would think I'd pick the Hebrew without hesitation, which is not something I ever expected to say. It's one of those rare experiences where translation doesn't feel like you're reading through a window. It feels like you've opened a door and walked inside, then that's incredibly rare. Especially when a novel that's already considered one of the greatest science fiction books ever written. I honestly didn't think I could be surprised anymore. Turns out all I had to do was read it in another language. So, tell me what you think in the comments below. I want to know. Have you read it in Hebrew? Have you read other translations in different languages? I'm genuinely really curious. If you like this, like, subscribe, and hit that hype button. It would be great. And if you want to access the podcast or get early access to videos, check out Patreon, Substack, and channel memberships. I'm Darth James, and I'll see you in the next episode.